Oh,
here we go.
My computer unplugged. Okay, I'm here. All right.
Perfect timing. Hello. I think that we are live. I'm Colleen Dipple. I'm the founder and CEO of Families Empowered, and I've got a lot of hands behind me. I'm very excited right now today to be here with Alex Wax and Eva Biso. Families Empowered is a non-for-profit statewide organization that serves families mostly across Texas, but for free. We connect families to schools and schools to families. We partner with traditional schools, public charter schools, private schools, homeschooling networks. We trust parents to make really good decisions for their kids, and we believe that parents know their kids best and want the best for their kids. And so we spend our time building relationships with schools and community partners so that parents have information they need to connect with schools and school services that will work for their families. Uh-oh. I don't know if we're live or not, but I'm going to pretend we are. I think we are. It says in stream.
We are.
All right. We're live. So I'm Colleen Dipple. I'll try this again with Families Empowered. And we're here today with Alex Wax and Eva Biso. Families Empowered connects families to schools and schools to families. We do that for free. We're really excited to have both Eva and Alex with us today. They provide families with service and support at home. And we're super excited because normally we spend a lot of time helping families connect to schools that are kinder, elementary, middle, and sometimes high school. Like we had a great program about Cristo Rey Jesuit last week, which we were really proud of. But the COVID pandemic has really created terrible issues from pre-K to college admissions. And I'm a parent of a high schooler. And I have other friends who are parents of high schoolers. And we have at Families Empowered parents of high schoolers and high schoolers themselves who not only were missing school, but have big questions about how the COVID pandemic is going to affect college admissions and the college planning process. And we are really lucky today to be live with Eva and Alex, who spend all of their time helping students and parents navigate the college admission and college test prep process. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to just read your bio, but then I'd like for you just to share a little bit about what you do and how you work with families and students. Alex Wax is a certified teacher.
Sure.
She has a master's in ed leadership, and she became interested in the college admissions process as an undergraduate when she transferred to Rice University. She has an incredible expertise in test prep. So we're going to have a lot of questions about test prep, I think. She has experience teaching and tutoring the IC, the SSAT, the PSAT, the SAT, the ACT, the ACT, and all of these other tests that are really confusing. So we're going to be excited to hear some feedback from you, Alex, on that. She's also contributed original material to several test prep books, and she's been a reviewer and editor for Cracking the SAT. So she's also a poet, and a little fact, she was on Jeopardy. So she's probably one of the smartest people I've interviewed. Alex, thank you for being here. Eva is a mom to two high school boys. She struggled to find tutors for her students her sons who have learning differences. And Eva, a lot of our families face this issue, right? They have kids with learning differences. So dyslexia and ADHD. So Eva started At-Home Tutoring Services in the Woodlands. Full disclosure, I have used tutors from Eva. Thank you very much. Because I also have children with some learning issues. And they provide professional tutors and private tutoring in the Woodlands, and also in Houston. And they're serving hundreds of families. And I know that COVID-19 has allowed them to also use technology to provide tutoring and support to kids even outside of the Texas. So very excited. And they're offering private tutoring virtually and in person for all grade levels. And I want to thank you guys, because I know what you do is private tutoring and you have private clients, but you have so much expertise. And having you here to share that for free with our families is pretty great. So I'd love to just get an overview so how's the college counseling process going, Alex? Did you hear me?
I don't know, is Alex on a delay?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you, and I don't know if it's my connection or yours. I'm sorry. Will you tell me again, just because I just had a little bit of lag, will you tell me again what you just...
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no. All right. Well, Alex, we'll get Alex back on. She's having trouble hearing. She'll come back on. I don't know. Usually that's the Wi-Fi on the other end. And all right. So Eva, I'm going to have you step in for Alex.
I'll do my best.
All right. SAT, ACT, to test or not to test, right? So we're hearing a lot about this. What, for all of our high school students who are listening and the parents of high school students who are listening today, what are you hearing and what are you telling your clients?
You know, Alex is going to be able to answer that from the professional side of college admissions. You know, we are asked that question daily. It's very confusing to parents, right? Every day there seems to be an update from ACT or SAT. We have dates and then dates are canceled or moved. I know that one thing Alex tells parents is that we're all in the same boat. Every student that is about to take the SAT or has taken an SAT and is looking at colleges is in the same situation. So this is not there. It's a level playing field. And we ask that families remember that and not feel that you are at a specific disadvantage. Every single student that took an SAT earlier this year and wanted to improve their score and possibly had some test prep and was ready to take it in the spring is now delayed. Schools are understanding this. They are waiving deadlines. They are pushing things back. And we believe that they will give students the opportunity to submit scores later in the process than they normally would. So we do believe that there will be opportunities for students that are prepared to take the SAT again. Alex has much more specific information on which schools will be waiving those requirements. You know, it may not be necessary to have an SAT score if you're entering. Alex, perfect timing to join us. I can't speak to the specifics of which schools may or may not be waiving SAT or ACT scores, or what the deadlines are going to look like for children that have, or excuse me, not children, young adults who have taken the SAT or ACT earlier in the year and have been prepping and are ready to retake it to improve their scores.
So Alex, can you hear?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Fantastic. Yeah, if you think these tech issues are bad, you should see what's happening to the College Board and ACT right now as they're trying to figure out how to do testing throughout this whole pandemic. Basically, everything that Eva just said is correct. It's absolutely the case that that many schools are going to be waiving or moving the test score requirements. Some of the public schools that have already done so include Texas Tech. For private schools here in Texas,
Uh-oh. Oh no.
Technology, the joys. As we've learned this year, moving online instead of in-home for tutoring, it's not without its challenges.
Yeah, this is tough. Usually it's you know, it's Wi-Fi. Who knows? Some days it works, some days it doesn't. I know we're gonna work to get her back. So it would be great. It sounds like we have a list of schools that are waiving the SAT and some that are postponing. But I do know, and you know, Eva, because you have kids yourself, that the SAT, there were kids who had taken it in the spring, had expected that they would get to take it again, and knew the score they wanted, and so then there was a big concern about whether or not they would be able to take that. And it sounds like the testing will resume, and that schools though will be flexible.
We know schools will be flexible, and we believe that it is true that there will be SATs offered later this summer. I mean, right now there are testing dates later in the summer that are available. So,
and where would a parent or a student find those testing dates? Is that on the SAT website?
Very simple. If you Google ACT 2020, if you Google SAT 2020, you will populate a list from each organization that will share dates, deadlines for applying, late applications, if there are spaces available. That may be an issue with everyone having dates pushed back. That's one concern of ours, is that if you're considering taking the ACT or the SAT, it's a really good idea to go ahead and sign up as early as possible. There may be limited numbers of seats available if they are practicing social distancing at testing centers.
So that was the other question I was going to ask, is what advice do you give students about these tests? When should you take a test? So we know some eighth graders are taking them, some ninth graders are taking them. In the process of college admissions, does it start in 11th grade or does it start in ninth grade? What advice would Alex, who's not with us,
So what I've learned from Alex is that it is not a bad idea to start thinking as a college freshman or even the summer after your freshman year. Speak with someone or start finding resources available to you to guide your path over the course of the next few years. You want to make sure that your course load is appropriate, that you've addressed any gaps.
Sorry, as a high school freshman or college freshman?
High school freshman.
Okay, great. So ninth grade, all the parents of ninth graders who are listening,
yes,
you should be thinking about that in ninth grade.
In ninth grade, this may be the summer after your ninth grade year. This is the perfect time to be thinking about, what is my plan? College visits, not necessary, but looking online, general information, size of schools, budget. There are a lot of different factors that you can eliminate from the thousands of schools available to you to start looking at college selection, narrowing some things down, get a general idea of what you think. As a freshman, you shouldn't know where you want to go. You shouldn't have a list of 10 schools that you should apply to, but you may have a general idea of what type of school: large state university, small private school, what section of the US you're interested in. Texas.
So when Alex comes back, and I hope we get her back, I'm gonna ask her a little bit about this. But I also so if I'm a first generation college graduate, right? And I actually am a first generation college graduate and went to a public school, but my public school was not a very big public school. Lots of kids are at these huge schools. Who at your high school, right? So if I'm that parent of a first-time high schooler, who's assigned at a high school to help me figure this out?
Every school operates with a different program, and that's part of the challenge to parents, right? Is to be able to locate the resource. Some schools have a great college admissions department with multiple professionals available to them to guide them through that path. Some schools do not have that available. There are free resources. There are wonderful organizations. Alex has a nice list that she was planning on sharing with us today.
Alex is back. Hopefully all fixed. Can y'all hear me now?
We can.
Fantastic. Okay. So Eva, hopefully I'm not going to repeat anything that you just said. And
Good.
I see Deanna's question there in the chat.
Good question. Yeah, so Deanna's question is, what is going to be the main way schools determine the academic readiness of students? GPAs will be wonky, I like that word, due to COVID-19, and testing has been delayed, yet many colleges start accepting applications in the summer.
Yes.
So, yeah, so we'll stick with public comments now that you're back. What's your answer to that?
So I would say that to some extent, this is a little bit of an unknown quantity. This is, unprecedented time for all of us. I think that most schools are doing, one specific thing. Some are going pass fail, others are not. Depending on your particular school, what's being done with grades and GPA at your school may vary. But all of this is going to be looked at in context by admissions officers. So even if you're applying to a school that's very large and that mostly normally looks just at grades and test scores, there's going to be a little bit more of a more personalized process this time around, because we really do, as admissions professionals, all of us, and every admissions officer I've talked to wants to take into account the different circumstances that kids are going through and the different sort of situations that they have. So context is really going to be key. As I think Eva was saying, there are absolutely going to be more chances to test. And even the College Board itself, who produces the SAT, has actually asked colleges to be flexible about deadlines for scores. So we're going to definitely see chances for students to test. Many schools, as you may have mentioned, Eva, I'm sorry if I missed it, I've also talked about going test optional. Which doesn't mean don't take the tests, but it means that you have a little bit of flexibility as to whether or not you submit those scores and when. So in one sense, Deanna, the answer is nobody's really sure, but I think that admissions officers are really ready to take on the challenge of looking at your student in the context in which they are and sort of taking all of that into account as they're working through this process, which honestly is just going to run a little later than it has in previous years.
So we have another great question, and I know that you guys both work with kids on this, from Victoria earlier. So Victoria, I hope you're still on, and if not, we should get this to you. She said, due to COVID, I wasn't able to properly learn and prepare a real college essay. So I think Victoria's a student. What would be the best way for me to prep my college essay / admissions paper? So this gets to the question about who in your school or in your community can help you with this. And that's a great question, Victoria. I wish you would talk to my son.
That is a great question. The answer, I would say, Victoria, or for anybody else, is you absolutely don't have to have done that yet. Even if you were a junior and you were working on it, maybe normally your friends worked on it in English class, or normally that's something you would do, you absolutely have a ton of time in the summer and into the fall to work on that and really make it something special. In terms of resources, there's actually a resource that I'd love to shout out called the College Essay Guy. His name is Ethan Sawyer, and his website, I believe, is collegeessayguy.com. But he is absolutely somebody that I'm proud to use some of his activities with my own students. He has great resources for how to really make your essay help you come across as a student, and they're all free and they're all available. So that's something that I'm so glad is available. But the other big thing to think about is you absolutely don't have to have done this yet. It is perfectly fine to just be working on it now.
So we have a question from Anne, and her question is, what about for high school sophomores and juniors? This kind of gets to what Eva and I were talking about. It's like, how soon should you start thinking? What should they do that's different from the great advice that we gave for freshmen? So Eva and I were talking about how after ninth grade, you really need to start thinking about what your plan is. What about these sophomores and especially juniors? Everyone says that's the pressure year. What should these folks be doing?
I think that the major thing for sophomores is, if you're a sophomore, you don't need to start doing test prep right away. for most kids, I would say when you're learning Algebra 2 is a great time to start preparing for either the SAT or the ACT. The other thing that I would say, though, is you can be working on the other parts of your application, whether that's thinking about what kind of school you might want to go to, whether that's a bigger or a smaller school, whether that's thinking about specific majors that you might be interested in, and you can be pursuing those interests. That might mean taking.
Oh no. Oh. And she's got some great
little Alex knowledge to share.
We'll get her back. I know that Ayla will get her back.
Pop in and give us some amazing knowledge and then move back.
Yeah. So one thing that Simona said, which is, hello, you can start at a community college with no SAT scored or low scores and transfer to a four-year college. Actually, Simona, I would say thank you for that advice. That is really good advice, especially for first generation college graduates. I went to a community college for 2 years. I did, though, take the SAT, and I did prep for the SAT. I think in this era where finances are really tight, there's lots. It's really important to get good advice and to get it early. Sometimes private institutions actually have more money than state schools. We can get into scholarships and all of that when Alex gets back. But community college can be a way, if you struggled a little bit with the SAT or ACT, to make college doable. So I do appreciate that feedback. And as someone who did go to community college before transferring to a four-year school, I think that, especially if you're a first generation college graduate, can be one way to go. But I do think everyone should feel prepped and prepared to take the ACT and the SAT. And my advice is, if you want to go to college, my view, and this is somewhat controversial, is that there's no harm in taking the PSAT or the ACT and really seeing what your score is. And because now it's optional in some schools, that doesn't mean, it means if you scored really well, you can hand it in, or you can choose not to share that score. Right. But if you don't take it, the reality is there may be doors closed to you.
Yeah. That's absolutely true.
Assessment?
That is absolutely true. And I would also point out that sometimes kids don't realize this, but no particular school cares whether you take the SAT or the ACT. And for about 30% of students, they're really going to like one test more than the other. So you can prepare for whichever test you like more. I think the PSAT is actually a great way to sort of test that out. So you get the experience of taking that test, seeing what you think about it. And then there are free ACT resources available online. So you can even compare and see which test is better. For many of my students, they like one test more than the other. And so they focus their prep there. And that works for scholarships, for almost everything. I think, Colleen, the point that you just made that, doors might be closed to you, even though schools are test optional, doors might be closed to you if you don't take these tests, is a good one. Because even for some of these test optional schools, they're not going test optional for scholarship or merit-based money, which is a big difference. So there are absolutely schools at which, even if you don't need the test to get established as a student there, to get admitted, scholarships may not be available or may not be as available to you if you don't have an SAT or ACT score. There are lots of free resources available for prep, which I think is really wonderful. It's something that we're all working to kind of make more accessible. And I absolutely recommend, that students do take the time to figure out which test is better for them and prep for that one. Whether your prep consists of, a class or simply taking some practice on your own.
So we have another question about the ACT and SAT, and I want to get to that. And then also, I want to also ask some questions about this idea of the right school and finding the right school. And by the way, Alex, we really appreciate your persistence. It's great. And I think we've all learned during this COVID pandemic that we have to just persist with technology, and eventually we figure it out. So thank you for that.
I apologize that y'all are now seeing my living room, but that's what you got to do.
We're all working from home.
We've had kids and dogs and, spouses and partners and all kinds of people pop in. And your living room's better than my teenage son. So
that's good, I think.
Okay. So one of the questions we got is, do you guys know if there are discounts for taking the ACT or the SAT? Each exam costs money to take.
So
and I have to talk on that.
That is a great question, and I'm so glad to be able to answer this in the good way. There are fee waivers that are available to students who need them. You can get fee waivers for the test itself, and then also for sending your scores, which, believe it or not, also costs money under normal circumstances.
Oh, wow.
You can actually send scores for free. Now, everybody gets a couple of free score sends with their registration, but if you're a student for whom any of these fees are a barrier to access, you can get to take the test and send your scores for free. That's something that I would say, speaking to your school counselor about, your guidance professional, is probably the way to do it, because they have fee waivers to give out, but they don't necessarily know you need one unless you're the person who emails and asks for one, and then you can get one. So absolutely, that's available, and don't be afraid to reach out and take advantage of it.
Well, and I do know that lots of some of our urban districts have done an amazing job paying for SAT for students. So I think in places like HISD and other districts and San Antonio ISD and others are also now in the sort of as a commitment to equity and college access for all, are paying for students to take the SAT and or the ACT. And so again, what I heard from you is advocate for yourself, advocate for yourself, advocate for yourself, and ask your college admissions counselor or the person who makes your schedule, your counselor, your guidance counselor, should be able to direct students to that. And then ask if your district is paying for the SAT, because some districts are doing that.
So usually as districts are doing that, what they're doing is offering a school day test, like a test during the school day, to have kids take. And that's something that more and more districts are doing, which is great. But yeah, the resources are there. Another nice thing is that many colleges are now moving to what are called self-reported scores, meaning that you don't have to send an official score report to them. You can report your scores yourself, and then only if you're going to enroll do you have to send an official report. So
it's a verify. It's a trust but verify process.
Exactly. Trust but verify. So if you're somebody who doesn't quite qualify for a fee waiver necessarily, but the cost is still a hardship, that's something that schools are doing to help you so that you don't have to send more than one score report ultimately. And I've also known many admissions officers, even if a school doesn't really have that policy on the books, a lot of times they're flexible. So I think, Colleen, what you said about advocating for yourself is really important. This is a human process, and they want to help. So
I think this next question, I want to get to Victoria's question in a minute, but I think Deanna asked this earlier about GPA, and the answer might be we don't know. But for people living in Texas, especially for public school students, and we work with private schools, Catholic schools, other private schools, but in public schools, if you are in the top 6% of your graduating class, you are admitted. It's your golden ticket. And so for lots of high schoolers, they're working really hard to make that top 10 or top 6% for an auto admit to the school of their choice, whether that's A&M or UT or UTSA or where. But those public institutions, again, in the name of equity and expanding access, have created this GPA standard. how is COVID? We've eliminated start exams, often end of year exams. Eva, you know about this because you work with so many families. Yep. How is this going to affect, if at all, class rank and GPA? And is this just a district by district, school by school issue?
So this is a district by district issue. Different districts are doing it different ways. For example, just off the top of my head, HISD here in Houston, which is the district I actually used to teach in, is doing it such that if your grades from this semester help your GPA, they get included. And if they don't get included. So Spring Branch, on the other hand, has just decided to pretend this semester grades wise didn't happen. It's not impacting GPA or class rank at all, which is making some kids really happy and other kids less happy. So this really is a district by district question. Obviously the auto admit stuff is by law and that remains in place. I think you're going to see, for students for whom having that extra semester of GPA might have kicked them into that auto admit place and then they didn't have that, you are going to see some flexibility around, they can't have necessarily an auto admit, but you're going to see some flexibility around listening to those students' stories. But in terms of the actual traditional auto admit, the 6% for UT, the 10% for all other public schools, that is a district by district thing. And that's another great question to ask either your guidance department or your registrar. Sometime between your junior and senior year, you should get a unofficial transcript from your school with your class rank and GPA. This happens by law. So if you haven't gotten it by the beginning of August, start bothering people because they absolutely owe that to you.
So for parents of rising 11th graders or rising 11th graders who are listening today, they should receive their class rank by law this fall.
So they should receive their class rank. Class rank is it's by law for rising seniors. For rising juniors, for rising seniors, they don't actually do class rank yet for rising juniors. Not officially, although you might well know kind of where you fall. The other thing that I would say is really sorry about that. The other thing I would say that's really important would be that outside of those top percents, while auto admit is absolutely one way to get into these schools, it is not the only way. And I would encourage students not to give up. If your dream is A&M, but you're outside the top 10% of your class, that does not mean that you don't have a wonderful pathway to go be an Aggie. And that's true for every school. I think, sometimes we are so focused on class rank as a wonderful tool that we forget that there are other pathways as well. And that's something that I always emphasize to my students. And I think everybody should remember that because this process is stressful. I see a couple of other great questions.
Yeah, that's a great segue into Victoria's question. This is sort of, where do I start? Like, where do I apply to college? And I know what I want to major in, but how do I apply? And I think about actually a friend of mine who has a rising senior. She has a daughter as a junior, and who doesn't live in the state. So I won't out her if she's following. She knows we're doing this today. And her state closed schools earlier than some of the other states. And she called and was almost in tears and said, my daughter was supposed to retake the SAT. We were going to use spring break to visit schools. We were going to visit schools over the summer. We really wanted to narrow down and find that right fit. And we're talking about 17-year-olds who don't know if they want to go to a big school or a small school or a public school or a private institution or a liberal arts school versus a school that makes you declare your major. So how is this COVID situation affecting that kind of advice that you're giving to your clients? This idea, how do I know where I want to go?
So a couple of things. Victoria, I want to speak to your question really fast because I think yours might also have been a little bit more logistical. There's a common application that a lot of schools are on, hundreds of schools, and also there for Texas schools, there's something called Apply Texas, which is applytexas.org. That's where you can apply to all Texas schools. The Common App will have some Texas schools on there, but also a bunch of out-of-state schools. And you can set up your accounts and apply that way. I wouldn't necessarily recommend getting everything filled out right now, simply because not everything has rolled over to the new admissions cycle yet, and I wouldn't want you to lose your work, but those are the resources that you're going to use to actually apply. As to figuring out, Colleen, to your question, kind of where to apply, one of the things that actually has been positive, I think, in this whole unprecedented pandemic situation is that schools have really gotten on something that, in my opinion, they should have a while ago, which is providing more virtual resources for students who, for whatever reason, can't visit. I think, now when we apply to so many schools, it's not feasible to ask students to visit 10 schools, either financially or time-wise. So there are tons more, even than there were 6 months ago, virtual resources that kids can use. A lot of schools offer virtual tours so that you can go on the website. They'll take you around campus and you can see everything. There are a lot of times admissions offices are having chats like this one, hopefully with slightly better tech on the guest's part. Sorry again. But they're having chats with students who are in various majors so that those students can speak to what their experience is. As you say, the experience at a smaller liberal arts school that's very discussion based in its classes is going to be really different from the experience you're going to have in some cases at a big public school. And schools are putting out the resources now so that you can start using that information to kind of narrow things down, even if you can't visit, which of course most of us can't always before we apply.
Yeah, I remember as a first generation college graduate, I could check out schools that I could drive to or my parents could drive to, but my parents didn't go to college. So the idea that we were going to fly to California to look at a school or fly somewhere out of state just was not in their minds. And even if it was, they couldn't afford to do that. So that's really great advice. And it's good to know that colleges are providing more online resources and ways to check out the options. I think we did the applytexas.org for the Common Texas application.
That's actually for the Texas application. The Common application is commonapp.org, and they're 2 different websites. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. I probably wasn't clear in what I said, so sorry about that.
And Victoria will put that in the chat for you as well, and for anyone else who's listening. And so I think this idea of around kind of, how what's your timeline for walking students? So you mentioned like some colleges are still accepting applications now, which I think a lot of people don't know that. So that's actually good advice. When do you, for people listening, what's really the ideal timeline? If I'm a rising senior, what does my year look like? What kind of advice would you guys give to your clients about how you should use this next year?
So as a rising senior, the first thing I would say is SAT and ACT, if you haven't yet taken them, now is a great time to do whatever self-study or other preparation you are able to do, and go ahead and take those tests in the fall and into the winter. The other thing is, while you certainly can apply very early, sometimes we feel an artificial pressure to get those applications in, and you don't necessarily have to, this year in particular. But I would say the summer and fall are about test preparation and putting together your application, with the idea that there are some schools with earlier deadlines, or some schools, as you say, that are still accepting applications, but it may actually have been easier to get in when you apply a little bit earlier. Some of the state schools in particular, they need to fill their classes and they want to fill their classes. Applying a little bit earlier, especially if you're maybe not quite as strong an applicant, can sometimes be a good strategic decision. That being said, applications in general, you want to get them in by sort of the winter is what ideally, I want kids to enjoy their Thanksgiving. I want students to enjoy their Christmas break. So we try to get them in the fall. And then in the spring, it's about visiting where you can or doing research on those schools that you've gotten into. And of course, not letting the senior slump affect you too intensely so that you're still challenging yourself and working as hard as you can to maintain your grades in your classes because, well, it isn't common, and I don't want to scare anyone. It is possible for an offer of admission to be rescinded if you get terrible senioritis and just absolutely do nothing your senior spring. But I would say, summer and fall are the time to kind of be working intensively on this process. And that goes, I think, for students, whether they're working with a counselor like me outside of their school or whether you're handling this process on your own. Either way, that's kind of your timeline.
I think a lot of parents appreciate your message about not slacking off your senior year. So that's good. That's good to know. And also the idea that we don't have to ruin our Thanksgiving. I mean, those of us who have high school students and friends with high school students know that everyone is very stressed between sort of the Thanksgiving to February period. There's a lot of work to be done, and everyone is trying very hard to get all that in before the end of the year. So thank you for that. Like, take a deep breath and pace yourself message. Can we just talk a little bit about AP?
Absolutely. Sorry, I'm plugging my computer in an effort to not be sent away from you guys again because I'm enjoying this conversation. There we go.
No, that's great. Great.
Okay.
We're all seeing, it's fine. We're getting, all we care about is advice. So that's great. Our parents,
advice, Alex.
We had someone who joined us once in a car.
Were they
what
driving
it is. We're
at
all,
the time?
No, they pulled over.
Okay.
But it is what it is, right? We're all making it work. So talk a little bit. Can you guys share? So there's lots of questions about AP. Should I take AP classes? Does that make me more attractive to colleges? Is there a cost to taking AP classes? And then am I guaranteed college credit if I take an AP class? So that's kind of three questions.
So the first thing I would say is, yes, AP classes are great, but don't worry if they don't exist at your school. The idea is to take the classes that are going to challenge you in your areas of strength, that are the most challenging classes you can handle, whatever your context is. Some schools don't have the resources to offer APs or honors classes. That's okay, and it's not putting those students at a disadvantage because students are looked at in their whole context. That being said, if your school does offer APs or the IB program or honors or dual credit classes, which a lot of schools in Texas do, it is absolutely worth taking those, assuming that they're classes you can succeed in. We'd rather see you take a couple of those in the areas that most interest you and that you're the best student in, then try to stack your schedule with 6 AP classes and do really badly at them and just hate your life for the entire school year. Nobody wants that. Colleges don't want that. I don't want that. Nobody wants that. So APs do not cost more money to take, and your school is usually going to, although I don't think always, but for the most part, the schools cover those AP exam fees. So you're not, in most cases, paying to take the AP exam when you take it at school. And that's an end of course exam that's supposed to demonstrate what you've learned. Now, that those are scored on a scale of 1 to 5. If you are able to earn a 3 or better, you're usually going to get college credit, but it really does depend where you apply. Some schools are going to only take 4s or 5s. Some schools use APs only for what's called placement, meaning, for example, if you take the AP English exam, you don't have to take that first semester English class that you might otherwise be placed into, but you're not getting actual college credit. You're just being placed in a more advanced class. So it really is going to depend on the school that you're trying to use those credits for. But if you get a 3, 4, or 5, depending on your university or college, you are eligible for AP credit.
And AP classes are they're given, the AP exam is given at the end of the year, like other end of year exams. Were those given this year? And if so, how are they different?
They were given this year with mixed success online. I think I made the joke earlier, if you think my tech issues are bad, you should see the College Board. The College Board, of course, runs both the SAT and the AP exams. Most kids were able to submit their exams. These became, rather than the multi-hour and multi-section tests, they became just 45-minute exams that you took online at home. There was there's some differences in the scoring, all of which are positive for students. They're sort of making it easier to do well, I think. And colleges have agreed to treat these APs that were a little different this year like regular AP exams and treat them in the same way in terms of college credit, if that's something that they offer, or in terms of placement. So if you took an AP exam this year, or if next year, for whatever reason, we have to do online AP exams or anything like that, that's not going to be a disadvantage. You're still getting not just the credit itself, but also even if you didn't get a 3, 4, or 5, or the school you're applying to only accepts 4s and 5s and you got a 3, it's also just a positive for them to see on your application. Again, just challenging yourself is a great thing. So APs did happen. Maybe not as well as they could have. There were some tech issues, but you're still getting your credit.
So what I just heard is don't stack APs. So this idea, I think what kids are sort of feeling a lot of pressure to take all AP classes or to start AP classes, as soon as like 10th grade and to take as many as possible. And what I just heard you say is take the ones you can be successful in, and challenge yourself by taking, but be realistic.
And I would say that goes, there are absolutely schools at which the vast majority of competitive applicants have taken a full slate of AP classes, but those are 15 or 20 schools out of the 2,000 incredible schools here in the United States, I think that we spend a lot of time thinking about those 15 or 20. And, for those schools, it might be that there is pressure to take a full slate of APs. That being said, I tell my students a lot, if you're not somebody who's thriving taking a full slate of APs, that may not be the school for you, and you may not actually like it there that much, even if you were to get in. What I would say is admissions officers want APs to be a tool for you so that you can demonstrate that you want to challenge yourself and that you can challenge yourself again in the areas in which you're a strong student. There shouldn't be, for the vast majority of students, this idea that you have to take a million of them. Here in Texas, because they do impact GPA and thus class rank, because they are sometimes weighted in the GPA, we do have a lot of pressure that direction. I understand wanting your GPA to be as high as possible. But also, I think that, yes, stacking APs just to stack APs is not how they were intended to be used. And I don't think that it's a positive, it's not a good idea for a lot of students. So don't do it unless you really want to.
Yeah, but I think that that's really important, right? Which is we hear a lot about the balance of getting the pressure and the mental health issues that kids are facing. I want to, I'd love to hear a little bit from Eva about I know that you have spent a lot of time connecting parents with tutors, and how often are you all supporting families who have kids? Do you have services that you provide for AP, or do you also, is it sort of everything?
We do everything. So yes, absolutely. Students who are taking AP classes, we hear from parents often, somewhere after the beginning of the school year, they're incredibly challenging courses. And students that need support call us, and we're able to help them with weekly tutoring throughout the school year. And they're feeling very prepared by the time the AP exam rolls around. We also have families that call us, a few months before the AP exam just to polish up their skills and review semester one and prepare. And so we're happy to help in any way that's needed.
So I want to just ask a question that hasn't come up, but we started this by talking, Eva, about how you started getting into this work, having children with some learning differences. And I think a lot of times, Alex, people who have kids with learning differences or kids themselves with learning differences think, I can't handle college. College isn't for me. And I guess what I'm wondering is, are there ways, are there messages or are there special supports for kids with learning differences? So things like, I have a daughter who's dyslexic, right? So the SAT or the ACT and there's a lot of reading intensive stuff. So are there special supports for kids with learning differences?
Great question.
So there's sort of two pieces to the answer to this question. The short answer is yes, those supports exist. There are schools out there that can support you almost no matter what kind of learning difference or challenge you have. All schools are by law required to give you accommodations. If you are a student who receives accommodations at school, for example, if you have an IEP or what's called a 504 plan, all of those accommodations can go with you to college, and you can ask for them if you need them. And in many cases, if it's a 504 plan, you are legally obligated to have those. They have to give them to you. There are also a lot of schools that are especially well known for helping kids advocate for themselves and providing additional sort of supports. There are some schools with special programs. Texas Tech here in Texas has an absolutely fantastic one, the Techniques program. But there are others. But the big thing I would say is that I've had plenty of students with learning differences who have excelled not in a special program just for students with learning differences, but just by taking advantages of the resources that their school offers. Most schools are offering help tutoring centers where you can go and work with a student or another trained tutor to work on things like writing. Help with time management and how to study, that kind of, how to access the resources that you need in the library, all of that stuff. That support is available not just for students with learning differences, but also for first generation students who don't always have context to know this stuff. So that is available, and every school has some version of that. There are certainly some that are more friendly or easy to navigate than others, but I absolutely, if you have a learning difference, if you have a challenge that even if it has made high school and accessing what you need to in high school hard, that doesn't mean a 4-year college isn't for you. If you want it to be for you, it can be for you. That school is there.
Alex, can you also include some information on accommodations for the SAT and ACT for children with learning differences?
Sure. So SAT and ACT offer accommodations. The way this usually happens is that you have them through your school first. So if you have an IEP or accommodations, extra time, anything like that through your school, they're going to then help you apply for that extra time with, or whatever it is, whatever, sometimes like for dyslexic students, often they'll have a reader, or you'll be able to do it without a Scantron. There are lots of different sort of accommodations. You apply for those. Again, that's something to speak with your guidance staff about. There's usually somebody who will specialize in that, who knows about it. But also, sometimes you get turned down. The other thing I would say is appeal those decisions if you get turned down. Your school isn't always going to do it. They're not always necessarily very experienced in how to appeal. it is possible to appeal those decisions. ACT and SAT will send you information about how to do it. So if you think that you have some kind of situation or diagnosis that entitles you to accommodations and you're not getting them, keep pushing. They do exist. They're there.
So I know we're coming up on time. I think we could talk about this for hours and hours. And there's so many unanswered questions. First, I want to say thank you again. You all, I know that you both provide mostly private clients with invaluable support and service. And we appreciate you being willing to share your expertise with our families and our, our followers for free. So thank you. What I keep hearing is guidance, 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 which is what you all provide. I do want to say to folks in the Houston area, some of our schools are working with the Emerge Fellowship. So if you are in a school that is working with the Emerge Fellowship, you need to find out about that, and we can put that in the chat. But I want to make sure that for parents who do want additional supports and services and may at this stage say, look, you know what? I sent my kid to public school and I saved a little bit of money by not going to private school. I'd like a little guidance. And so can we get your information so that parents can reach you and potentially get some support from you guys? Because I do know as a parent myself, I'm just over my skis. Once I hit high school, I was like, oh boy. So I would really like for our parents to be able to reach you and to be able to get some guidance and support for you. I know that you do charge fees, but you also have lots of resources that you can share. And then I would encourage anybody who is in a school that has Emerge to really take advantage of the Emerge Fellowship, which provides guidance. And you have someone on your team who used to work at Emerge. So they're really good at that. So if we can put your information in our chat, that would be great. But can you give our listeners and our network your information?
Sure. So, and I want to emphasize, anybody with questions, please feel free to email me. You do not have to be my client to use me as a resource in terms of expertise. I would love to answer your questions. So my email address is my name, which is Alexandra at-Home Tutoring Services.com. You can always reach me there. From a professional perspective, I provide, and my team provides, I have several other people who work with me, help with all steps of the process, whether that's selecting your school, whether that's applying for accommodations, test prep, working on those essays, helping you figure out what all those deadlines are and where should you be applying early. All of that is stuff that can be strategic, and we can do that. Please, if I didn't get a chance to answer your question, Simona, I see you have a question in the chat that I just didn't get to. Please email me. I would love to be able to help and support. And yes, I want to second what Colleen said about Emerge. I'm a former HISD teacher. I taught in a Title I school, and resources like Emerge are absolutely what I wanted my students to have and what I think all students deserve. They're an invaluable resource, and we're really lucky that we have that here in Texas. So please take a look at that. And if you're looking for more resources, come find me.
And I do know that you have a page on the At-Home Tutoring website that's specific to you, and I think we also have that. So we'll put that in the chat. I want to thank everyone. I want to thank you guys again for giving me an hour of your time, for sticking with the technology. We are often really hard pressed to find resources for high school kids. It's sort of like everybody freaks out, when kids get older, they look scarier, but they're really important too. They smell bad, they look scarier, they're a little grumpy, but they have a lot of, they have a lot of needs. And they have as much anxiety, and they have this big transition. And so getting the kind of support that you provide and giving advice to kids, I think this COVID thing has made a really stressful time in their lives even more stressful. And we sometimes forget about that. We worry about the little, and we forget that the bigs are still kids. And so we really do appreciate your time. I'm really, I'm again Colleen Dipple. I'm the CEO of Families Empowered, and we're going to be here tomorrow with folks from Texas Children's Hospital, who are just as smart as our Jeopardy winner here.
Gosh, oh my gosh.
And they're going to be talking from tomorrow really about the science of how COVID is in fact impacting pediatrics and how it is affecting kids. And we know parents have a lot of questions about, should my kid even go back to school? Is it safe for my kid to be in sports? Is it safe for my kid to swim? Can my kid play on playground equipment? We are going to be here tomorrow with the best experts that you could ever ask from Texas Children's, and we're going to have that opportunity to ask them tomorrow. So we hope you'll join us tomorrow. In the meanwhile, thank you, Eva Biso from At-Home Tutoring, and Alex Wax, also from At-Home Tutoring, to help us kind of think through what is college admissions going to look like for our rising seniors. We hope maybe you'll come back and join us again sometime.
We would love to. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.